In the summer of 1518, a woman stepped into a street in Strasbourg and began to dance. There was no music, no wedding, no festival, and according to the story that survived, she did not seem to be dancing because she wanted to. She kept moving for hours. Then she returned the next day and danced again. Before long, other people began to join her. Within weeks, Strasbourg was facing one of the strangest events ever recorded in European history. A wave of compulsive dancing that appeared to spread from person to person. But before we turn it into a medieval horror story, there is something important to understand. The event was real enough to alarm the city, attract the attention of officials, doctors, clergy, and chroniclers, and remain in the historical record for centuries. Almost every dramatic detail beyond that becomes more complicated. The outbreak began in July 1518. Strasbourg was then a free imperial city within the Holy Roman Empire, not yet part of modern France. The region had endured years of hardship. Harvest failures, food shortages, disease, rising prices, social unrest, and intense religious anxiety had placed enormous pressure on ordinary people. This was also a world in which illness could not be separated neatly from belief. Many people accepted that saints could punish communities, that curses could affect the body, and that uncontrolled movement might have a spiritual meaning. Into that atmosphere came the first dancer, commonly identified in later retellings as Frau Troffea. Exactly what her movements looked like is impossible to reconstruct. The word dancing can make us imagine music, rhythm, and coordinated steps. Contemporary descriptions suggest something far less joyful, repetitive, uncontrolled, exhausting movement that observers understood as involuntary. Then the number of dancers grew. Some accounts describe dozens of people being affected. Later estimates say the total may have reached into the hundreds. The famous figure of 400 is repeated constantly, but it should not be treated like a modern head count. The sources were written for different purposes, at different times, and not all of their details agree. What does appear clear is that the city government believed it had a serious public crisis, and the response was extraordinary. According to widely repeated accounts, local physicians argued that the dancers were suffering from overheated blood and should be allowed to keep moving until the illness burned itself out. Authorities reportedly cleared spaces for them, built or opened platforms, and even brought in musicians and professional dancers to encourage the process. Imagine the logic. A person cannot stop dancing, so the treatment is more dancing. If those reports are accurate, the policy did not solve the problem. It may have made the spectacle larger, giving the behavior a public stage and surrounding it with rhythm, attention, and expectation. Eventually, the authorities changed direction. Music and public dancing were restricted. Some of the afflicted were taken to a shrine associated with Saint Vitus, a saint whose name had long been linked in European culture with involuntary movement and dancing mania. By September, the outbreak had faded. And this is where the popular version of the story usually delivers its darkest line. People danced until they died. Maybe some did. But the evidence is not as clean as the legend. Later accounts claim that dancers collapsed or died from exhaustion, hunger, stroke, or heart failure. One particularly dramatic number says that 15 people died per day at the height of the outbreak. Yet historians examining the surviving contemporary records have pointed out that those city documents do not clearly provide a death toll and may not confirm deaths at all. That does not prove nobody died. Prolonged exertion in summer heat among people already weakened by hunger or illness could clearly be dangerous. But they danced until hundreds died is not a fact we can responsibly repeat. It is a later version of the story, not a settled conclusion. So what caused the dancing? One popular theory blames ergot, a fungus that can contaminate rye. Ergot alkaloids can cause severe poisoning, including spasms, hallucinations, agitation, seizures, and dangerous problems with blood flow. It sounds convincing at first. Contaminated bread, altered minds, strange movements, mystery solved. But ergot poisoning is a poor fit for an organized outbreak of prolonged dancing. Severe ergotism can make people extremely sick. It can cause convulsions, pain, confusion, vomiting, and even gangrene. It does not neatly explain why people would continue a recognizable pattern of movement for days, why the behavior would spread socially, or why similar dancing episodes appeared in places and periods with different diets and conditions. Other medical explanations have included epilepsy, encephalitis, or neurological movement disorders. These can produce involuntary movements, but none maps comfortably onto the historical pattern described in Strasbourg. Another possibility is that at least some participants were performing, protesting, seeking attention, or joining a public ritual. Human groups are never simple, and a crowd can contain people with different motives. But deliberate performance alone does not explain why observers described many of the dancers as distressed, exhausted, and unable to stop. The leading modern interpretation is often called mass psychogenic illness. That phrase is easy to misunderstand. It does not mean the symptoms were fake. It means that real physical symptoms may arise and spread through psychological and social processes without a single toxin, infection, or structural disease explaining the entire event. The nervous system does not live in isolation. Expectation changes pain. Fear changes breathing and heart rate. Stress can produce tremor, weakness, fainting, altered awareness, and involuntary movement. When a community shares the same fears and the same explanation for what is happening, symptoms can take a culturally recognizable form. In 16th century Strasbourg, people did not expect stress to appear as an anxiety diagnosis on a medical chart. They lived in a religious world where bodily affliction, divine punishment, possession, and the curse of a saint were imaginable realities. If one terrified person began moving uncontrollably, others who were exhausted, malnourished, frightened, and surrounded by the same beliefs may have understood their own sensations through the same pattern. The movements could then spread, not like a virus, but through attention, expectation, fear, and imitation, operating below conscious control. This interpretation fits the social environment better than poisoned bread does. It also helps explain why the city's first response may have made things worse. Public stages, musicians, crowds, and official recognition could reinforce the exact behavior everyone feared. But even mass psychogenic illness is not a time machine. It is an interpretation built from incomplete records. We cannot examine the dancers, interview them, run blood tests, or watch reliable footage. We do not know whether every person in the crowd experienced the same condition. We do not even know how accurately later writers described what they saw or inherited from earlier reports. That uncertainty is part of the story. The dancing plague of 1518 sits between history, medicine, religion, and folklore. It was documented, but it was also retold. Each century added its own vocabulary: curse, madness, poisoning, hysteria, trauma. Perhaps the most honest conclusion is not that an entire city mysteriously lost control of its legs. Strasbourg was a community under extreme pressure, and for a period of weeks, that pressure appears to have taken visible possession of human bodies. The people moved because something was wrong. The mystery is where that wrongness began. In grain, in nerves, in belief, in fear, in the crowd, or in some combination we can no longer recover. 5 centuries later, the dancing has stopped. The question has not. Reality is stranger than fiction. Let's decode it.